Hello, this is Brian King. I am an entrepreneur and business relationship coach, and I'm here to help executives and entrepreneurs transform the conversation between their ears and between themselves and their peers so they can provide and create more empowered role modeling and create productive teams. You ready to get started? Awesome. Because today's guest is Andrea Herran. Andrea is a true human resources generalist who really understands that human resources functions only add value to an organization when it supports corporate goals while at the same time supporting employee morale and ensuring legal compliance. She's knowledgeable in the full spectrum of human resources activities. Her passion is in assisting small businesses to achieve success through their people. She coaches clients on being authentic leaders, leadership style. She's wonderful at creating a productive work environment which focuses on positive interactions and eliminating the complaints. It's one reason her and I get along so well. She also teaches active listening skills, effective communication, and a whole lot of other wonderful things that just make the workplace an easier place to be. And that's why I invited her today. She's the principal of Focus HR Consulting, which I love this tagline, uncomplicates the people side of business. You can find out more about Andrea, her programs, her services, and everything else that makes her brilliant at her website, focushr.biz. So, without further delay, welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, Brian, for having me and for your kind words.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. Now, let's start with your tagline, uncomplicating the people side of business. You and I have similar experiences with clients who have goals that are frequently sabotaged by personality conflicts, adolescent emotions in adult bodies, and so on. You know, a variety of reasons that basically generate differences of opinion and make it difficult to get on the same page in the workplace. So you and I are then enlisted to dissect or get to the bottom of just what this conflict is and how to reconcile it so that we can bring the team back together again, right?
Absolutely. A lot of diagnosing going on.
No kidding. And in worst case scenario, it's reminding everybody that they're adults and they're supposed to play nice in the sandbox, but not everybody does. So let's focus on one particular aspect of the communication breakdown. You can call it an argument, you can call it a disagreement, whatever it is. And I'm not talking about the kind that involves the respectful exchange of ideas, agreeing to disagree, supporting facts. We're talking about two people that are not listening to each other. People that are bringing their intense feelings and their ego into play at the expense of real communication. And feelings can get hurt. There can be tension that's created. It can be one of those situations where you can cut the tension with a knife, but you really don't know what to do about it. And it can really erode the office morale. So in your experience, are there certain personality types that tend to initiate these type of conflicts?
Well, I think what's key is what you already said, is that both sides aren't listening to each other. And usually how it escalates to the point of a major disagreement, arguing, or just a total breakdown in communication is, believe it or not, is they're not using their ears. They're not listening to the other person. As you know, a lot of people have a tendency to look like they're listening, but instead, in their mind, they're thinking about what they're going to say, how to reinforce their position, or how to win the argument. And in the workplace, there is no room for winning. It's not about winning. It's about working as a team. So the first thing that has to be done is getting people to just take a deep breath, relax, and listen. And truly listen to each other. Not just fake listen, like, listening.
Yeah, that you're making, and this is one of my favorites, people that say that eye contact means you're listening. No, eye contact means your eyes are opened and they're aimed straight ahead. It doesn't mean that you're not thinking about your grocery list or, as you pointed out, not preparing your next statement to rebut what's being said or to come up with a real zinger to make the other person look bad. Listening is best demonstrated by you responding your understanding of what the person just said. You know, that's how you know that you're listening. And one thing you
Absolutely.
pointed out, which is really key, is that the outcome is win-win as opposed to I win.
Yeah, that win-lose mentality, I win, you lose, is what, when you go into a discussion with that mentality, that I have to win, the other person has to lose, it's never going to be a good, productive discussion because you're coming into it with the wrong mindset to begin with. If you go in instead and say, well, you know what, let's hear what the other person has to say. Now, and this is where people sometimes will misunderstand what listening is. People sometimes will say, but if I listen, that means I have to agree. And no, that's not the case. Listening is about listening to what the other person has to say, understanding what their point of view may be, and then expressing your point of view, if there may be parts that you agree with or you disagree with, in a way that is respectful to the other person. Because whenever you're having a discussion with someone, it's not just about you, it's about them. And if you put the focus on them, it's a much more productive discussion because you're trying to find a middle ground. You're trying to find something that both of you can work with instead of the I winner, you loser mentality.
Absolutely. Like you said before, it's about teams. It's about creating that cohesion. When you go in with a competitive mindset, you know, the I win, you lose, you're forgetting that you're not there for competition, you're there for collaboration. And what you
Exactly.
ultimately want to find is that middle ground, whereas where can we come together in our beliefs, the way we want to do things, our ideas of more effective process that's going to allow us to work as partners instead of adversaries. And when you go in with the mindset of, I have my beliefs and opinions, I want to hear your beliefs and opinions, and find out where they overlap, or find out where there's some flexibility so that we can find a mutually agreed upon way of doing things that maybe neither one of us considered on the way in. But because we listened to each other, gave each other feedback, we synergistically found something better than either of us had at the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, too, is that even when we're speaking to someone, instead of saying, oh, but I believe that this is the solution, is instead rephrase it as a question. Well, I like what you're saying, but have you considered this as a possible outcome? And what would that mean? Or, you know, we've done this in the past. Can we find out what went wrong last time to make sure we don't repeat that same mistake or that same thought process that caused it to fail the last time? Because we could be on the right track, but instead of taking route A, we have to take route B. You know, but both parties have to be open. And I find a lot of times when somebody is closed to that, it is it's usually due to an insecurity on their part. You know, people have a tendency to overcompensate for their insecurity. And that can be an overcompensation in control. Now, don't get me wrong, not everybody who controls is insecure. It's just one symptom or one aspect that we see. It could be because, you know what, you don't know. Maybe this person just came out of a meeting where they just got beat up because of some other error and they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So you've caught them at a wrong time.
That's
You know?
definitely a good point. You're not knowing what they're bringing to the conversation.
Right.
It could be they just got punched in the gut emotionally, and maybe they're not ready to have the conversation yet. Maybe they need a break. There are two things I want to add to what you said that are really important that I want people to keep in mind. When they come to it and say, this is what I believe, you can actually swap that out because I don't know what kind of experience you've had. When people use the word belief, they tend to take a belief much more personally and have a greater ownership of it.
Right.
But if they come to it and say, here's an idea, ideas are a little bit more disposable and more flexible. So if you use that kind of language instead, it's easier to kind of throw it out there and not feel totally rejected if someone doesn't like your belief, but maybe they have a different idea.
Exactly. And that's why I said we have to avoid using that term and find another way to express our a different viewpoint. You know, it's exactly what you said. Belief means personal.
And something that
Because
just
most people relate beliefs to things that they were raised on, things, dogma, you know, and while that's understandable, but when you're in a workplace trying to find a solution or trying to work towards a common goal, you have to be flexible. It's about ideas. It's about working together. It's not about. It's honestly, it's just not about beliefs.
and that's the key there. You're putting out ideas, you're putting out facts until you find the one that works for the both of you. And another thing I wanted to add about what you said about it's not about being in control. One thing that can really help a person put their ego in the background is if you realize that instead of being the smartest kid in the room, you are going to be of greater value if you are the most curious kid in the room, because you're going to keep asking questions. You're
Right.
going to be here to explore and not only offer up ideas, but hear ideas, because you're there to discover. So let your curiosity be your guide, not your ego. And you will tend to get a lot more done, and you're a lot less likely to butt heads with people.
Right. I mean, and the best leaders in any company, in any organization, for profit, non for profit, are the ones who are humble, are the ones that listen to the others in the room.
The best
And
leaders are the best students.
right, and a lot of people mistake that leader means you have to be the one with the manager title. Some of the best leaders I know were never managers.
And
They
when
never
you
had
look
that title.
historically, some of the best leaders, whether it's a president or a CEO like a Henry Ford, these were people that surrounded by themselves by people that were smarter than them in the areas that they were not particularly good at. And they'd get all the information together, and based on that, they'd make an informed decision. So it wasn't necessary to be the smartest. It was probably the one who was really good at bringing out the best in the people around them.
Absolutely. You know, and even when I work with my clients, I say, I don't have the answers. I have lots of questions. But it's not about me giving you the right answer. You know, well, except for the legalities part of things, and there is usually a right and a wrong answer. But it's when it comes to the leadership side, it's about asking questions, and it's about you figuring out how you want to proceed and be perceived by those around you. And usually being the controlling person that dictates step 1, 2, and 3 constantly is not going to turn you into a leader. Not even close. It makes you a micromanager.
Well, in addition to knowing how you want to be perceived by the people around you, but making sure that your style makes them feel that you feel good about them. You see them as a valued part of the collaboration and not just a means to an end. Like, you're a cog in the wheel and you're here to satisfy my will. And I don't see you as any more than that. Because unfortunately, I've known people that have worked for people like that, that they see them as a dispensable part of the machine, and talk about kicking the life out of them as human beings, and they wonder why productivity is not where they'd like it to be.
Right, and those are the companies or those are the organizations or departments that will see a lot of turnover because eventually people will leave. They get to their fill point, and or they've been looking for a job, it's just taken a while to get there, is they're the ones that leave. People don't leave companies, they don't leave jobs, they leave their managers, they leave their supervisors.
That is such an important point, because you could work for a place that you really believe in the mission.
Yep.
You love the customers, but at the end of the day, the person that's on your back all day long, who is just whittling away at your sense of of self-worth, they'll miss the customers, but they'll leave if it means leaving with some dignity. And it's really unfortunate that some managers don't realize that, or supervisors or coworkers. It can come at you from any direction, right?
Oh, absolutely. And part of that will stem from the fact that companies will promote people into those leadership positions, management positions, based on years of service or how well they did at their previous job. And then they promote them, and maybe they're totally worthy of that promotion, but that then they don't give them the skills and the tools and the resources to be successful. Because let's face it, like if you're in customer service, what worked for you as a customer service rep is not going to work for you as a customer service manager. And companies a lot of times don't see that. And they don't give them the tools to bridge that gap.
So often, where they promote the person that's really good at their job, but it doesn't make them a leader, and that's not a bad thing. Not everybody's necessarily born with that skill set or the ability to incorporate it, and that's okay. Maybe they're best suited to be a team member, so let them do what they do best. One thing I've always said is, one of the reasons I don't work for a social service agency is I'm afraid of being promoted to supervisor, because I don't want to boss people around. I want to be the one in the trenches getting my hands dirty. I wouldn't want to be that far removed from the actual work that I lose sight of what the work is.
Right, and that's because you want to you prefer, and most people do, want to work on what brings them joy, what is their passion, and what is their strength. And to give a very a general example is I've had clients that say, I promoted our best sales guy to sales manager. And I say, great, so how far did your sales drop?
That's been my question too. There goes your bottom line.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I go, first of all, you just took your best sales guy out of the field, so he's not working your accounts as much, So instead of working your accounts for 40 hours, he's only doing it for 20 hours. And secondly, is that what he wanted? Sometimes we forget to ask people if they want to be promoted. Leave people where their strengths are and where they want to be. Maybe sometimes the average worker is your best one to move up into management because that's where they're going to shine, because they're not so good in the trenches as they are with overseeing it and understanding the whole process and how their department or their role fits into the bigger picture.
One thing you might even see, speaking of arguments, is you might see somebody who has moved away from something they're really good at to management suddenly becoming more argumentative in their new role.
Bitter.
And sometimes that's simply because this person is no longer living their passion. This person's frustrated, their needs are not being met, and they're starting to snap at people around them.
Yes, because they're absolutely miserable. And then everybody wonders why they're failing.
Well, hopefully that's something
focus on their strengths.
Really take to heart and make a much more informed choice around that. Now, speaking of arguments, let's focus on personal responsibility for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
If there are coworkers that tend to really disagree with each other often, to the point that it interferes with their work, what steps can they take to end the disagreeing and the constant arguing and shift towards greater civility and cooperation?
Well, honestly, it's going to take one person to want to make that change to start with. And sometimes that is easier said than done. But once at least one of the persons decides that, you know what, I want to change this, the next time they have a conversation, they got to start asking questions. Stop giving opinions, stop giving feedback, and just say, well, that's an interesting solution that you have. Why? How did you get there? Or why do you think that'll work? What do you think is going to be the outcome? Start asking them questions. Make that the other person feel that you're actually listening to them. Practice what you preach. Practice what you want other people. They say the golden rule is treat others as you wish to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
I actually say there's a platinum rule. Well, I'm not the only one. Many people say this. The platinum rule is treat others as they wish to be treated. So sometimes if a person is constantly argumentative because they want to be right, sometimes it's just because they have a need to feel that they're being heard and they're being recognized for the knowledge and experience that they have. So if you're the person that's always battling this, take a step back and say, you know what? I'm just going to start asking a lot of questions. Find out how they got there. How did this work before? How is it that they are so confident that this is the solution? But asking questions in a nice way, not an interrogation, and turn it into a conversation, and you're going to see that person is, over time, it's not instantaneous, will start melting and will start actually having more discussions.
One saying that I'm very familiar with, and just about every parent or authority figure has probably used this at one time or another, is that person just needs a good talking to. But my favorite is the opposite of that. One of my favorites is that person just needs a good listening to.
Yeah.
They just need to know that they're being heard, that their opinions matter. And one thing I want to add to what you were saying is the metaphor I use for situations like this is you've got to understand the dance. If there's this pattern between two people, well, every time I walk by this person's desk, they give me this look. When they give me that look, I do this in response. And there's this prescribed pattern that they go through each and every time. Mm-hmm. They've agreed to this dance that they do with one another. And what you pointed out is you've got to introduce some new steps to the dance.
Yes.
In the form of questions, in the form of listening. Because that dance depends on your partner doing their old steps, if you want it to change, bring some new steps to it. All of a sudden you're asking questions instead of making accusations or throwing facts out there. Now you're listening instead of just doing all the talking or trying to talk louder as that person raises their voice. So either they're going to disengage from you completely because they really like that dance you've been doing,
right,
or they're going to have to adjust what they do, and suddenly you have a new dance called collaboration.
Exactly.
But
it's very true, because as you know, everybody comes into a conversation based on their own life experiences. Like the example that you gave of somebody walking by somebody's desk and but they had that look on their face. Maybe that look is them thinking about something and they actually don't even notice you, but your experience has taught you for whatever reason that look meant X. And the other person could be just thinking Y and actually has nothing to do with you whatsoever. So you have to remember that everybody comes into a conversation with their own experiences, the good and the bad, that they will always demonstrate or use or attack situations or people based on those past experiences that you have no idea about. You can never understand because you've never lived in their shoes. You've never lived their life. So if you take a step back and say, you know what, they're coming from a different place, let me try to see if I can understand at least just a little bit of that as it relates to this situation.
You are so right. In this world of self-appointed nonverbal communication experts, it's amazing how they'll look at an expression or something and immediately think that they can read the person's mind, and they tell themselves a story about what that person means, what that person must be thinking, and they create this entire argument in their head, and the person maybe has a headache. It has nothing to do with them. So one thing I want to encourage people to do, if you see somebody give a look, all you know is that, well, it means something. And stop right there. If the person doesn't offer you anything more, don't turn it into something it isn't.
Yeah.
Because you could very well be manufacturing a conflict where one does not exist.
Absolutely. And most conflicts are that. Manufactured where it doesn't exist.
Somebody has their own stuff and they're doing a wonderful thing called projection. They're putting it on you or someone else. And, oh, so-and-so thinks they're better than me because they made this look. Well, did they say they think they're better? No, but I could tell. That creates so many issues, and we do it to ourselves.
Yep.
Now, let's step it up a notch here. The suggestion you gave for one person needs to say, I'm tired of this. I don't like this dance. I don't want it anymore. I want to do something new. That kind of responsibility sometimes is enough, and it changes the dynamic. But let's say there are two coworkers that are simply unable to resolve it between themselves, and the supervisor needs to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
what options does a supervisor have if this is brought to his or her desk?
The biggest option is don't ignore it, which is what they have a tendency to do because, oh, that sounds like a sticky situation. I don't want to get involved. It sounds very personal. And believe it or not, I have actually done this. You know those stress balls that you
Oh,
can
yeah.
get, to squeeze? Actually bring that into the room with the two of them. The person holding the ball is the only one who gets to speak, and the other one has to listen. And the other
Wow, you
person
actually
can't
have to
talk
instruct
until
them on
they've
turn
got the
taking.
squishy ball. What?
You actually have to instruct adults on turn taking.
Yes. Because otherwise they'll keep arguing with each other and you just get the same thing over again. It's like what you're saying, introducing new steps to the dance. And
Good idea. I need to
that
start doing that with
physical
my kids.
object just is a new step that causes them to stop and say, okay, I can't speak, so I have to listen, because I don't know when this person's going to stop, so I can't interrupt. And then you ask the person saying, okay, tell me about this latest discussion. What happened? And the other person has to sit there and listen. They'll get a chance to have their turn and have the person explain their side of the argument or their side of the conflict. Ask, as a supervisor, ask questions. Well, why did that make you upset when she said that or when he said that? Sounds pretty innocuous. Why would that trigger that kind of a response from you? Get that out. Let that person speak because they want it to be heard. Let them get it all out and say, fantastic, thank you for sharing. Now it's your time to listen. Please pass the ball to Susie, and now it's her time to talk. And have the exact same conversation, the same questions with her. Tell me about your point of view. Do not attack the other person. Do not tell the other person that they have the wrong side of the events. I want you to tell me strictly from your point of view how you viewed the situation. Typically what happens is at the end
supervisor's
they
becoming
start
the dance
seeing.
instructor.
Yes. And the thing is at the end they start seeing that, you know what, because they kept interrupting each other, they were kind of saying the same thing probably. I've seen more arguments over people saying the same thing two different ways and the other one's not realizing it.
One thing that's interesting is because I work a lot with educators, I'm often called into what's referred to as an IEP meeting, which is where kids that have special needs get a specific plan to help educate them to compensate for their learning challenges. Mm-hmm. And I'm often called in because the two sides can't see eye to eye. There's the school staff, there's the parent, and I find exactly what it is you just said. Is they're saying the same thing differently, but nobody's listening long enough to catch up to that fact. So I come in, I listen and say, are you kind of saying this or you're saying that? Yeah, it's kind of like what this person just said. And before they know it, they're on the same page.
Yep.
And they give me all this credit like I did something special. No, I listened. It's amazing how big a difference that can make.
It absolutely. I have people that are like, oh, you're so great with getting along with people. And I'm like, really? All I'm doing is listening to them. I focus on listening and what they have to tell me and what they're saying. 80% of what I do.
Yeah, one of my biggest endeavors or values when it comes to meeting people is I'm not about making sure they feel good about me. I'm about making sure that they know I feel good about them.
Yeah.
I make it very other-focused. It takes all of the self-consciousness away from you. It takes any kind of need for you to, get a lot from that person. You show up with that service mindset. How can I help you feel good? How can I help you feel valued? And that in itself can just boost morale through the ceiling in the workplace when you're there to take care of your team members. Because if that's what you're modeling, it's going to be reciprocated. It's just the law of the universe.
Right, and you've heard me say this before. What is the last time you were in a conversation with someone and they truly listened to you and you felt that they truly listened to you? How did that make you feel?
It
so
felt
when you
like
do
I
that
was
with
the
someone,
most
you're
important
giving
person
them
in the world.
Yeah. So if we start listening to each other, just in a time span of 15, 20 minutes, you're going to have 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 people, depending on the group, all of a sudden boosted up and feeling so much better.
It's amazing, just one little shift. Of all the different companies that you've worked with over the years, Andrea, are there some specific tips that you've handed out that you have found have consistently been of value to people?
Listen. It's the biggest one. If you start listening to people, and listen with the intent to listen, not with the intent to have a response. Okay, so pay attention to people, listen to them. Understand, try to see the world, or try to see the other person's viewpoint. Try to see it from their side and how they experience things. Okay, especially in a manager-employee role. You know, managers will be like, oh, but I know this will work. Yes, but is it giving that person extra work, more work? Is it making it more complicated? Look at it from their point of view. And lastly, understand that people come in with their own experiences and thoughts and knowledge, and respect that.
So listen with the purpose of understanding. And one thing that you just taught me right now is when you come up with an idea, it's really easy to get caught up in all the wonderful things that idea is going to make happen, but sometimes you miss the fact that it might be causing problems for the people that are going to have to implement it.
Yep.
What's it going to do to them? That's a really excellent point. And what was the last one again?
Understand that people will come to you from their own point of view, from the way they see the world, their experiences, their knowledge, their expertise. And respect
so you have to understand their story.
Yes.
What does it mean to them? Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful stuff, Andrea. This has been such a fun conversation. I'm so glad that you found time in your very busy schedule. Now, we had to reschedule this a couple times, but we made it work. We made it work, and that's really awesome. So tell me, Andrea, where can people that want to learn more about you and from you, where's the best place for them to find you online?
Oh, the best place to find me online is on my website, which is focushr.biz, B-I-Z. I do a newsletter, so I do have a newsletter sign-up box. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm there. Don't do a lot there, so may not get as much interaction. And I do also have a Facebook business page, which is also Focus HR. But and you know what? The best way is if they've already got questions, they already know what they want to talk to me about. Email me at Andrea, A-N-D-R-E-A, at focushr.biz, and I will definitely respond to those.
Outstanding. Thank you so much again for being here. And everybody, thank you for watching. And please make a point of sharing this episode with anyone that you feel could benefit from it. And if that person has a job or ever has a disagreement, they can benefit from it. And please visit my website at brianrking.com. You'll find a link to iTunes where you can leave a review about how this podcast has helped you in some way. And also feel free to shoot me off an email at brianrking@me.com to ask me a question. And be sure to join us next time for another episode. Until then, this is Brian King saying, thanks for being you.